Going to come back. This resurgence of Aristotelian philosophy in medieval Europe produces something called the Scientific Revolution, which starts in 1543 with this guy, Nicholas Copernicus, using his telescope to discover that it's actually the Earth that rotates around the sun, not as everyone believed and the church taught. Everyone believed that the sun went around the Earth back then. That idea was so solidly entrenched in the culture that Copernicus did not publish his evidence in his lifetime. When he left his book, he's like, publish this when I die. And after he died, it gets published. Huge scandal. It takes decades, in some cases centuries, for European culture to come around and embrace empirical epistemology, but eventually they do. And this leads to the development of the scientific method, which I'm sure you've learned about in your science classes, but here it is in a nutshell. The scientific method is basically, a systematic, organized way of gathering scientific knowledge. And the go-to methods are observation, like Copernicus there with his telescope, and experimentation. Where possible, you set up a laboratory experiment to test different permutations. Now, how does this apply to political science? Well, political scientists observe, right? You can observe any phenomena. Running experiments is hard. It's rare that somebody like Woodrow Wilson, a political scientist, gets elected president and gets to conduct a live experiment. That doesn't happen very often. But there are lots of different natural political experiments going on across the 50 states, from one country to another. And so there's no shortage of material no shortage of phenomena for political scientists to observe, no shortage of natural experiments for them to monitor. Now, the scientific revolution is not like a light switch. It's not like overnight people figure out how to do science. It takes people centuries to give up superstition and refine the scientific method toward to the point where they're producing quality science. But we now take for granted that empirical epistemology, the scientific method, is the best way to get knowledge in the natural sciences, astronomy, biology, chemistry, physics, right? We know that this is the reason cars work. We know this is the reason that smartphones work. Right now, the scientists of the world are scrambling to develop a vaccine using empirical epistemology and the scientific method. There is no one who's saying, you know what we really need is someone to do vaccine research using Plato's rationalist epistemology or using some religious epistemology. No one thinks that's a good idea. Everyone agrees that natural science is going to get us the best vaccine the fastest way. You know what? Empirical epistemology and the scientific method, also the best source of knowledge for social science. And that idea is very old as well. Within a century of the scientific revolution kicking off, social scientists get this idea. There's this group called the Enlightenment philosophers. They get going in the 1600s and they keep going through the 1700s. Here are a couple important examples, not chosen at random. Both strongly influenced the founders and framers of the United States and our Constitution. On the left, the English political philosopher John Locke. On the right, the Frenchman Montesquieu. Anyhow, these Enlightenment philosophers are so psyched about what empiricism is doing for natural science, they're ready to apply it to people, right? So they are applying empiricist epistemology to history and politics. And they're trying to figure out what is the best possible form of government. And as I just mentioned, this Enlightenment philosophy strongly influences the founding of the United States and the framing of our Constitution. The founders saw politics as a science. So here is a gallery of some of our key founders and framers. And this is a good opportunity for us to talk about the distinction between founders and framers. Founders are people who helped the United States separate from Britain and become its own country, right? So they're founders of the country that is now the United States. As opposed to framers, people actively involved in writing the U.S. Constitution. So Washington, for example, George Washington, namesake of our great state, was both a founder and a framer, right? He was involved in fighting for independence, and he presided at the Constitutional Convention, so he is both founder and framer. James Madison, probably too young to be considered a founder, but he certainly was a framer. He was very influential at the Constitutional Convention, so framer, not founder. Thomas Jefferson, founder, primary author of the Declaration of Independence, but not a framer. He was overseas serving as ambassador to France when the Constitution was written, so founder, not framer. John Adams, also founder, not framer. He was serving as U.S. ambassador to Britain when the Constitution was written. Alexander Hamilton, too young to be a founder, but like Madison, a major influence on the U.S. Constitution. And Ben Franklin, both founder and framer. So there you go. More on all these guys later. But what's interesting, returning to our main point about politics as a science, political science, Franklin, Jefferson, and Madison didn't just, all these guys read Enlightenment philosophy. Franklin, Jefferson, and Madison wrote Enlightenment philosophy. They were Enlightenment philosophers. They were political scientists. So the founders and framers practiced political science, respected political science, used political science.